Taxes. It's one of those things. At least according to where I am, there was a delay that was put into place at the beginning of this year where the IRS was only going to accept individual or regular tax returns after a certain date. I did my taxes. And when I first did my taxes, because of a variety of manners, I considered the first COVID relief of $1,200 individual COVID relief a form of income. And I factored it into business expenses associated with my LLC. When I did that, I did my taxes. And in consideration of doing my taxes, lo and behold, I got back an amount just a little bit over $1,200. And I said, I want to put that $1,200 into a U.S. savings bond because you have that option. If you do your taxes and you're given a tax return, you can choose, if it's a certain amount or above, to put it in some denomination of a U.S. savings bond. And I said to myself, well, if it was relief, and this is comparable, for instance, to that situation that went on in 2008 and 9, when there's an emergency situation, so there's some manner in which cash is needed as an influx into the economy to stimulate things. And then after you get it, at some point in time, you reinvest it in the economy, up to and including, I don't know, getting a savings bond. What could you do with a savings bond? Well, I'd hope to use that savings bond in the course of getting recertifications for my certificates so that I could use those certificates in the course of, along with my other work with my LLC, assuring a specific kind of school safety system that I've been trying to work on for several years. But that was not what was going on. Somebody didn't like the way I filled out my taxes the first time. So they refused to accept it. So I had to do it again. And when I did it again, well, they didn't like the second time. So I had to do it a third time. And the third time, they said, well, okay. And I said, you know what? I'm submitting this as is. This was income. I explained it. I went through the process. They gave me back an assessment and said, no, actually, you owe $12. You owe $12 in taxes. And I said, wait a second. Ever since that bank account got open and was used to finance an act of terrorism, and then my ass has been trafficked around all over the place, my passport, all these things have happened. Somebody said I had a $12 risk penalty that only the people on the back end of the banking system would know about and wouldn't show up on my credit report. I said, why do I have a $12 risk penalty? Well, if I pay it, can I go ahead and address the matters related to the account and work with the... No, you're never going to be allowed to do business with the bank again. But if you don't pay it, it won't show up on your credit report. 5 years later, I've been trafficked several times, and there's at least 2 major municipal bonds connected to the city I'm in right now, underwritten by that same bank. I can't get a phone call. I can't get anybody to talk to me. I can't file a police report and get a response. So they sent me a bill, and apparently it's now $12.01. There was a 1 penny penalty put on that $12, presumably I owe to the Internal Revenue Service. The problem is they've been using whatever electronic accounts I'm allowed to have, up to and including that tax record, to put illegal liens on people in other countries, up to and including heads of state. One specifically. They've been doing this for over a year. And I contend that they've actually been doing it since before he became president. I didn't know until I found out. Let me ask you a question. The situation that person's in right now, if somehow it was allowed to be justified, if somehow it was allowed to be justified to put me into some sort of concurrent situation where events in his life and the country's life are connected to me and what's going on with me, what difference would it make if I had, before Valentine's Day of 2021, been able to have obtained a $1,200 U.S. savings bond instead of being denied 3 times the actual capacity to pay a $12 tax to the IRS? See, I tried paying it 3 times. 3 times I tried paying it, and all 3 times they refused to process the payment. 3 times. I have all the records. I processed it through the way they say to pay it online. Well, there were all these other deals that they were setting up before they'd clear it. And it always got to this very important point, right? Where I needed to convert it. And I just don't do that. So they wouldn't accept my tax payment. What a difference would it make if it was a $1,200 US savings bond as opposed to a $12 tax I owed to the IRS? See, the whole point is none of the COVID relief was taxed. But that also means none of the COVID relief was allowed to be identified as income to the government or some expenditure by the government that was taxable income to the people. This is very, very harrowing, especially because the primary date of concern, where there was a zero on the tax associated with the COVID relief, was Valentine's Day. And if you're an individual like me, you have 12. But if you're a couple, a married couple, you have a 24. And that has been a very big problem. So on July 15th, the penalty connected to that tax they refused to let me pay 3 times. It's going to do what? If I did owe that tax, I already paid it. But I don't owe the tax. I'm owed a $1,200 savings bond. Not only that, but around that time, presumably, I owed for a bill on a phone bill that was put into collection. I've tried twice in the last year and a half to pay that phone bill. Both times I go to process the payment. They refuse to process the payment. I began tracking that phone bill in 2018. Every once in a while, they just resell the debt. They swap it out between whoever it is they've given the credit. They won't give you any contact with their legal department. They're using that delinquent phone bill. Which, by the way, the phone was stolen. It had evidence on it, and the phone was stolen. They're using that delinquent phone bill to try to extort me and other people. They've been doing it since December of 2016. I had that phone with me. I had that phone with me when I was kidnapped. I had evidence on that phone. That was the phone I used to contact the Federal Trade Commission to open up an account concerning identity theft around the same time I contacted the credit bureaus, right before I was kidnapped. That's the phone they have been trying to extort me with ever since, and they wouldn't let me pay the bill. They wouldn't let me pay the bill on the phone, and they wouldn't let me pay the bill, or what they say is the tax I owe to the IRS. Now, last year when I contacted the IRS, I had a very forthcoming conversation with all of what was allowed to be represented as my taxable income for the previous 7 to 10 years. And that's when I found out that the city and county of San Francisco issued me a check for what was supposed to be the closing out of my pension fund when I left. And nobody ever told me. They cut the check. Apparently the check was who got that check. And nobody from the city and county of San Francisco will get back to me in any way, shape, or form, including about what happened to that very specific metric that was the amount of the pension benefits I had accrued while I was working for the city and county of San Francisco, by the way, in the Department of Public Health. Compliance regarding billing for medical treatment, which also includes prescription of medications. Now, here's the thing. I don't actually owe $12 in taxes, because if I did, it would have already been paid. It would have been paid before April. But they wouldn't accept the payment because they kept trying to extort me into agreeing to do something not only illegal, but completely unacceptable. I've tried paying it 3 times. They refuse to accept it. They won't let me pay it unless I agree to engage a hate crime. I'm not even going to try anymore. What are you going to do? Because I know they're using the record that I owe that tax to lean on other people and me as well, right? They make some justification for some bill. It's not even a real bill. It's more of an attempt to try to extort me. And even if I try to pay the extortion, they won't accept it. So all they're going to keep doing is what? Harassing me with paperwork and with inputs into a database that says I owe a tax and that it's accruing the penalty. What happened to that $12 risk penalty that Bank of America put in my name when it refused to investigate allegations that their bank on the Magnificent Mile of the city of Chicago was engaged in cooperation with financing acts of terrorism that started in another country and that have been pinging and ping-ponging all throughout the planet up until this day. It's been over 5 years. I opened that account on June 3rd of 2016 in a completely 100% good faith effort. I talked to them on the day I opened the account and deposited the check. To this day. Who has that kind of clout? Who has the kind of clout that they can literally set up a scam like that and work it this comprehensively for this long? Do you know how much has been robbed from the people? Do you know how much crime they've willingly and intentionally engaged and then covered up? There's absolutely nothing acceptable or legitimate. This has nothing to do with intelligence. This is not about Secret Service. This isn't even about Secret Selective Service. And I would never agree to engage acts of espionage for a country that was identified as an enemy of the United States. But what has happened is I'm very certain that people infiltrated the government of this country in order to intentionally undermine it, while it also framed people in other countries that could otherwise be our allies, so that they could aid and abet undermining those countries as well. This is supranational. This is supranational, and they believe that they're above the law. What are you going to do? It's 13 days until July 15th. This is not my problem. It's actually somebody else's problem. But the point is, I'm not allowed to have an actual verifiable or legitimate existence myself while somebody else uses me as nothing more than a pawn in some very, very badly played ego game. I am sorry, on one hand, if my behavior or comportment does not correlate with your desires or your anticipations of what you were hoping to get out of me as a product, but I was never a product. I have another thing here. I disputed something. I disputed an error of $2.15. It was decided on January 7th of 2021. That would be exactly 6 months before July 7th of 2021. July 7th, 2021. I won that dispute.